Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm so thrilled to be here talking with you guys. And I wanted to show you there's actually this really, I got trapped in my friend's house because there's like this intense rainstorm happening, but there's this really amazing like artwork on the wall behind me that really reflects the way energy moves on the planet. So I just want to show you guys that really quick before I talk to you, if that's okay. One second, let me turn on the light. That's a little better. So you guys are probably familiar with, let's see, I'm not sure how good the quality is going to be, but you can see it's like a torus. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the model of a torus or not, but it basically like the concept is that like in the middle there, sorry, this is a little hard to do with a computer. In the middle there, that's like the center of where, like a seed is planted or an idea happens, and then the energy flows out from there. And this is also really illustrated in the way that trees are structured, right? So like, the roots below and the branches above. So I just thought it's so cool that it happens to be on the wall behind me right now as I'm here about to speak with you guys. I just thought that was really cool. My friend is a very talented artist and makes those out of like multi-layered wood carvings. So yeah, I'm happy to be connected with you guys. I've been aware of you guys on Instagram for a little while, and I've just had so much going on. Oh, thank you guys. I've had so much going on that I haven't been able to engage before this, so I'm really happy to be here with you. And I'm just pulling up my notes. Something that struck me in terms of what would be cool for us to talk about is the sort of ethical, like, because you guys are really using, you're coming together via the medium of technology in order to like try and make the world better, right? And to think critically about some of these issues that we're facing on the planet and basically to mobilize. And I'm not 100% familiar with your social movement engine. I was reading about it and I'd love to know more. But, for me, like, I've really found that the most kind of ethical, like spiritually fulfilling use of technology in this modern moment is to use, some of these non-renewable resources that like we all have in our computers and our phones that are allowing us to communicate, to try and mobilize around and spread information around and empower ourselves and each other around, regenerating the planet and doing better for the planet. So that's part of why I really wanted to talk to you guys, is because you're doing that, and it's been a really big focus in my work as well. So I noticed there's a lot of teachers and people who are super wanting to help the planet a lot, and they just kind of go off into their own little worlds on their own little farms, and there's not so much of a spreading outward of the message, which is part of why I joined social media, part of why I have my podcast and spread these things that I teach in this way, is because there's a sense of like social responsibility, I think, that comes with this work. So I was reading material thinking of like what to kind of touch on in this talk, and there's this guy David Holmgren, who you guys are probably familiar with, maybe not. He's one of the co-originators of permaculture, and he talks about what he calls the inherent design tension between autonomy and higher order systems control. And what that means is like, so if the two aspects are autonomy and higher order systems control, autonomy, and there's tension between them, right? What we mean by autonomy is the sort of human, individualistic ways that we have of sort of centering ourselves. It's almost like the Cartesian mindset. And where we are sort of putting our individualism and our like the interests of humanity at the center of what we do, when actually we're part of these systems, which is where the higher order systems control comes in. Like, we're part of this broader web of ecosystem. We're part of this whole web of life that's going down here on this planet. And so these two things, like, as we see, there's tension between them, right? Because like, our modern civilization right now is a great example of that. As humans, we've been exercising like our autonomy to create things like fossil fuel reliant homes and transportation systems. And we're really starting to see and kind of be humbled by, and this will, as far as I can tell, only become more apparent through our lifetimes, the higher order systems controls sort of starting to come into place, right? We're seeing harsher weather events, acidification of the oceans, things like that are reminders that as designers, as people who are looking to move consciously in the world, we have to balance like our own needs with the broader context of this biosphere that we're a part of. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Yeah. So when I think about these, I've just thought a lot about these challenges and the way that I choose to walk in the world. And that's part of why I'm interested in feeling like a respect for your group, is because, my understanding is like, you're seeing, like we just described, the impacts of our individualistic decisions, and then, consciously choosing to unify and mobilize and work to make things better, which is really amazing and totally in line with what I am trying to do. So my I don't know how much you guys know about me. My name is Jennings Ingram, and for the past 7 years, I've been working as a permaculture designer, environmental consultant, and content creator. And my work is really focused on teaching ways we can learn to heal ourselves and the planet. And a big part of that has been for me, and is spreading this information via technology. So I don't want to, so just a little bit of my story, just so you guys kind of know where I'm coming from. Really I'm sorry if there's a little noise coming from over there. I'm at my friend's house. Super briefly though, what caused my dedication to this work is I grew up on a farm in North Carolina that I spent so much time on. It was just such a huge part of my life for like all my formative years, right? So my nervous system is totally wired around participating with land and nature like that. And what ended up happening is, through this like really crazy sequence of things that went down, basically the land was poisoned by these really gnarly herbicides. And it was so like totally heartbreaking and crazy. And I was just like, God, there is not enough, because I had just started to do my permaculture design training, was fresh out of college. Like, I wasn't, and I'm not still really, I suppose, but like nobody was going to really listen to me in that decision-making process. But what I realized is that, these people had gone out and had this decision-making process that had led to our farm being poisoned. It's still poisoned, right? There's not fish, not frogs, any of these things that used to be there. And I just realized, like, gosh, this is such a huge vacuum of knowledge and empowerment that is really lacking in our society. So I'm not sure if you guys have had maybe experiences like that, where maybe some piece of land or something that you really love was negatively impacted by some decisions. I know that a lot of people, oh wow, yeah, Cheryl's like living in one now. It's crazy. It's so it's really, heartbreaking and confusing, but it also has been for me just a real strong motivator of like, well, that plus, learning about the broader context of what's unfolding on the planet right now. It's like, oh my God, like this is what I should devote my life to. I need to devote my life to figuring out how to make things better. And that's like led me in all kinds of interesting directions. So it was kind of crazy because our farm gets poisoned by herbicides. They're still active. I had just planned like this forest garden, everything there. And of course, it can't grow now. And so then I was living up in the mountains in Asheville, which some of you guys might be familiar with. Asheville, it's kind of famous as like a forward thinking sort of hippie city. And when I bought my house, it had this like beautiful forest behind it, but I didn't own the forest. I just had like a little tiny, piece of land with a house on it. And then these developers came and they bought the whole thing. And they originally said they were just going to put a few houses on it. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Like we'll have neighbors, but they ended up clear cutting the whole thing and packing it full of condos. And it was just the craziest. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just absolutely wild. And I had all this wildlife trying to come into my yard. I ended up having to I got this like ethical trap for the woodchucks because they were trying to come into my yard, but I had dogs, so they were like in danger. And that was another moment. It happened right after our farm got poisoned. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I can't ignore this. I can't turn away from this. It's literally right in like all the areas that I love. What can I do? So I had just finished. No, I had just finished my permaculture design training at that point. So then I convinced my one of my teachers to take me on as an apprentice, started working with him and his design company. And that was, 7 years ago. And here we are. And something that has been, it's just been super close to my heart. And I think it is for all of you guys. It's like, what do we do? And I think it's a creative question that we're all continually approaching with our various skill sets. And in the same way that like our individualistic actions are now having, our mindset, I suppose, is now having some consequences. What I found going in the other direction of like collaborative design and working with ecologies and people is that when we, combine forces like you guys are doing here, it's so powerful and it's so needed in this way forward. So again, it's a question to continually approach and reapproach. And the ways that I have embodied that, trying to help be part of the change that I'm currently embodying is I do like design work with people in person here on the island. Got several different food, forest, and gardens that I helped design and I'm helping to manage. I also have become proficient at social media and video editing. So I do that for my own projects as well as for other people who are aligned on this path. I designed this online course that I teach sometimes. It's called Regenerative Rituals. It's kind of like a fusion of spirituality and like actionable rituals for the planet. And then I host this podcast. It's called the Regenerative Revolution Podcast. And I just interview, people who are much further along on this journey than I am to bring educational material out. Some of the guests I've been most proud of are John D. Liu. He filmed the Les Plateau project in China and really popularized that, where they restored an entire watershed in just a few years. A bunch of amazing people. So even on this call, we're walking this interesting line, right? We're gathering here via this non-renewable technology to try to, activate within this critical window that we have to get the planet to a better place. And there's nuance in that. There's responsibility in that. And I take that like very sincerely as my mission. And I feel like you guys probably do too. David Holmgren speaks about, so I wanted to ask if you guys, yes, I will definitely put links to the podcast. And if you guys have any questions, like as I go along a little, like feel free to type them in the chat or like unmute yourself and ask or anything. Like I'm totally open. I'm just kind of, I put together this kind of way to think about these things. And I'm also happy to drop my contact info if you guys want to be connected or whatever. But I'll just type my it's called the Regenerative Revolution Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, everything. This year we're doing video podcasts. So that'll be kind of cool and like a nice change from just audio. So, so as I think about this kind of global moment that we're in, I was rereading this book by David Holmgren, which is amazing. It's called Permaculture, Principles and Pathways Beyond Sustainability, because the idea is like, just sustainability would mean that we're just kind of able to continue on our current path. But because of the sort of damage that's been done, we actually need to go past sustainability into like renewal and regeneration. And in that book, and I've heard many other teachers speak about this too, he talks about the reality of us being in energy descent culture now. So the acknowledgement that we've extracted a lot of the, easily accessible fossil fuels and things like that. And that kind of upward curve, like already happened. And we're sort of on the downward curve now of, we're still continuing on that trajectory or in terms of like, we're still extracting these materials, but it's becoming more and more apparent that we can't continue on that path. So one of the kind of key design principles, I suppose, that we use in trying to design, landscapes and systems for the better is, let's use what we have while we have it, to set up systems that are going to be less energy intensive and more in line with the planet for the future. So like an example of that is, if we were to go in and create, say, what's called a water retention landscape for somebody, where we're digging a dam and wanting to use that to sort of rehydrate the water table in an area. Of course, the machines that come in and dig that dam, they are burning fossil fuels and they are made in these like labor intensive ways. But if you do a project like that correctly, you have rejuvenated your whole water cycle in that area for many generations into the future. So that's like kind of an example of the sort of ways that we are looking to invest non-renewable energy at this time. So I when I was thinking about what to say here, I suppose what I've, alluded to is like the most ethical and empowering uses of this technology that we're using to speak at this time. There's tantalum in all our computers, which comes from largely the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is questionably mined, and all these things is figuring out ways that we can sort of take it offline and regenerate the planet and help our communities. So through my work in this field, especially interfacing with technology to connect with more of these projects that are rooted in like really helping the planet, planting trees, all these things, so there's a few ways that super useful, but connecting with others and forming bonds like we're doing here, like I do with my podcast. I try to do it with my social media, although it's a very surface technology. Some would call it like drip feed culture is pretty personified in social media, but I try to do it a bit there. And then the courses that I teach, which are in person and online, and that kind of create a container for us to come together and learn and figure out how to kind of redesign our lifestyles for the better. Obviously, this technology is super useful for learning, getting equipped with the knowledge that we can use to take offline and apply to the living, breathing world. I remember when I learned about permaculture first, I just absolutely binged like all of Bill Mollison's talks. I mean, I don't know if you guys have, I'm sure that you've heard of Bill Mollison. Yeah. And he is, kind of he's one of the like OGs of larger scale permaculture teaching. And I remember when I discovered him, I was so I could just sit and listen to him talk for hours. I just felt like it was all downloading into my brain. And that allowed me to start, before I even got certified or anything, I started to do like volunteer projects based on the things that I had learned in his online classes. So there's a lot of empowerment available in that. And him, I'll type it for you guys, but depending on where you are in your learning journey, you may or may not have experience or like experience these classes, but they're super fascinating. Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton. Jeff Lawton is really well known. He's like kind of Bill's sort of protege. There were a bunch of like bootleg ones on YouTube when I was looking this up in, whatever it was, 7 years ago, whatever that was. So if you just hunt around online, there's a bunch of and he's a very engaging speaker, very charismatic, funny, things make a lot of sense. It's like that. And then, mobilizing, right? Forming networks that we can rely on as energy descent continues and there's more and more need for self-sufficiency. So, sorry, they're singing in the kitchen. So we see that even through like little neighborhood apps like Nextdoor, where people can get connected to their neighbors. I found on social media, met many friends and colleagues and have gotten many opportunities that have gone off of social media. And then there's even like one of my podcast guests, he's Hawaiian. He created this app called Exchange Ave, which helps people to swap produce and plants and things like that with their neighbors. So you kind of just put up whatever you have in your yard. Like if you have chickens and you have extra eggs, you just put up that you have that. And then someone that is wanting or needing eggs will be like, oh, great. Can I offer you turmeric, or can I offer you even like, it could be like a surf lesson or something like that, just to get that local connection. Yeah. So those are some of the ways that I found this technology to really work. And I have more that I could, I have got some different methodologies that I think are important for us to learn. But I also would really love to hear from you guys if you feel called, like a little bit of your experience with like how has this technology helped you to kind of bring it into the real world, bring participation in this movement into the real world, and anything that you feel inspired to share, I would love to hear. I don't know, what challenges, I think we all have like various challenges in our lives in terms of like, how do I actually, help the planet in my day-to-day life? For me, what I loved about permaculture and those similar methodologies. For some people, the term permaculture is a little like they don't like to use it, which I don't often use it, to be honest, because there's a little bit of a stigma around the knowledge and sort of ancient technology of indigenous people being co-opted and like rebranded as permaculture. So so I suppose however we want to label sort of like direct action for the planet that can happen even in our own yards, I found that to be very empowering, because there's not a middleman, right? In a way, like you can do a technique as simple as sheet mulching, say, which is where you go to an area of maybe your yard that's sort of more barren, and you just lay down some layers of cardboard that you can get from things that you've ordered or your neighbors have ordered, and then whatever mulch you can get your hands on top of that, and that starts building soil right away. And it's just a really simple low input thing that you can go and do, and you don't have to go to the store. You don't have to I suppose it's just empowering in a sense of direct action, and that's one little thing, right? You can learn to propagate plants, and you can be walking around your neighborhood and you're like, oh my gosh, there's elderberry here, and there's whatever, another plant that I like here, black locust here, and or hibiscus, or I don't know what climates you guys are in. And it can be very empowering to be like, oh, there's something as simple as like getting your own little medicinal shrub of elderberry going from a cutting that you got on the side of the road. It can just be very like kind of a great way to start in terms of how do I bring things from up here down like into the soil and start to make a little difference for my ecosystem and things like that. So I think if you just research, permaculture, Jeff Lyon's a great beginner teacher. There's also this lady, she's cool. She's like, her name's Maura Gamble, which is like a pretty awesome witch name, I feel like. And she is Australian, and she's got such an epic forest garden at her house. And she is really, she's got great videos, basically, great how-to videos. She's kind of like, I feel like she's kind of like the witchy plant mom that I kind of like wish that I had. So I just really appreciate your reflections, Cheryl, and thank you for caring about the planet. And if you guys don't mind, I'd love to share a few on the similar lines of permaculture, but kind of like branching off points for you guys if you want to research or learn more about sort of like things that we can do for the planet, because they're not super like, it's crazy to me that these things aren't widely known, but they actually aren't. So a few of these methodologies are, I divided it up into elements, right? So we have earth, which is like permaculture, like I just mentioned. There's also something called syntropic agroforestry, which uses a lot of these similar principles to permaculture. And it's basically the whole idea is that we can plant plants that meet our needs and meet the needs of the planet, and that feed us and feed the web of life at the same time. And we can put these together in intelligent systems where they're meeting each other's needs as well. So you're not having to continually bring in like fertilizer and mulch and things once you get these systems started. So I'll type that for you. That's called syntropic agroforestry. And a great book to kind of just get started with this stuff, especially if you're newer to it, is called Gaia's Garden, by this guy, Toby Hemingway, who actually passed away a few years ago. It's just a really beautiful book. It's super helpful. He really dives into like I just described, how to create these interconnected systems that are feeding each other. And it just becomes a really fascinating, interesting kind of like biological plus puzzle plus like art piece plus way to feed yourself. And I find his work really inspiring, and that book in particular is great. So that's the kind of earth element. Then for water, I think the most important thing to speak about in regards to water is we all actually have the capacity to help heal the water cycle. And we hear a lot about the carbon cycle and how carbon is actually, like we all need to be so worried about carbon, and we do. But the water cycle actually governs up to, in my understanding, what I've learned from my teachers, perhaps even more of the global heat dynamics than carbon does. And we don't know the exact statistics, but it could be up to like 90% of global heat dynamics are governed by the water cycle. And so when we look at places like California or places like, I suppose California is the best example in the US. What we see, like there's this drought flood cycle, right? Like a lot of people, I don't know if any of you guys are in California, but they just had this crazy flood. But before that, it was this, it has been this really intense drought. That's because the hydrological cycle has been disturbed. And I will type for you. So basically, like the medicine for this is quite simple. It's just not widely known. And it's called water retention landscapes. So I'm typing this for you. Recommended mulch, and what about hydroponics? Okay, I'll answer that in just a second. Okay, so water retention landscapes. And a great resource for that is We Are Water Stories, which is, so there's a lot of nuances to the water cycle and repairing the water cycle, and it's a passion of mine. I'm not an expert, but I have a great the Regenerative Revolution podcast episode I did with Zach Weiss. Let me just find that for you guys really quick. Was one of my favorite episodes of all time, and he describes this quite well there. Let me just find it for you. And he's actually taken it further, where he has a whole kind of like academy that you can do to learn how to be a water steward, and he's made it his profession. He travels around the world. He cheerfully refers to himself as homeless, but he travels around the world restoring places where the water cycle's been degraded, including in California and Oregon, these other places. So in our yards, a lot of what this can look like is if you even do something simple like installing what's called a rain garden, that will help to infiltrate water back into the ground and heal the water cycle. And I know that we just have just a little while left, and these topics, like each one of these topics could literally be a lifetime of study. So I don't want to like overwhelm you guys too much, but I'll just leave you with like resources that you can use. So I'm pulling up my notes here. So then when we look at, so that's earth, water, and fire is the last one that I wanted to speak to you guys about, because, I saw from the sort of flavor of your YouTube and your things, like you guys are spiritually rooted. And so I felt like the elemental approach would be interesting to you. For fire, the fire cycles of the planet are another thing that have been disturbed. California is another great example of this. When these landscapes were managed by Indigenous people, they were burned with regularity, and this helped to prevent all the timber from building up that now causes these crazy wildfires. It also helped the life cycle of many different plants that rely on the fire cycle to germinate and spread. And it really affected the species composition of that area. Like, used to be a lot more oaks and hardwood trees, because these coniferous trees that are more flammable would be getting burned. And so Um, so now the work kind of is, I suppose a lot of it is really like we're coming back into relationship with these different earth cycles, right? And one of them is fire. So the most accessible way that I've found for a lot of us to reincorporate a relationship with fire in our lives is through using something called biochar. And I'll type that for you. Biochar is the byproduct of what's called pyrolysis, which is the burning of like woody material, but not allowing it to completely burn. And so you're left with these what it looks like charcoal, but you charge it. It's very porous, right? So you charge it with nutrients, and which basically means that you just soak it in certain nutrients and microbes and things like that to make them bioavailable. So like after you create biochar, which you can do in a variety of ways at home, which you can research, or you can just buy it. You can totally just buy it and do it that way. When you mix it into your soil, like you're sequestering carbon for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. You're providing many, many years of bioavailable nutrients in the soil, and you're also providing a really important home for microbes and fungi to live. So that's the kind of fire. So just to recap, earth is ways to work with the earth. Permaculture and like agroforestry are the two things that I would suggest you guys to jump off into. Working with water, creating decentralized water retention landscapes to help heal the water cycle, which is only becoming more relevant. All of this is. And then to work with fire, I would recommend creating or buying biochar and mixing it into your soil. And yeah, I know that's kind of a lot of information. And Betty is asking, she asked about, okay, recommended mulch and what about hydroponics? So mulch, it really just depends on where you are. Like the best mulch is going to be, just from a totally ecologically friendly perspective, is going to be what you can create or get from what's closest to you. So you're not like using excess fossil fuels to ship mulch close to you, because that's kind of like defeating the point a little bit. That said, like a lot of times what people will do, like we just had this on my property, if you're getting tree trimming done, have them chip those branches and leave it for you. And then your gardeners or you can distribute that onto your plants. There's a few nuances with using wood chips. You want to be careful. Like if the trees that are being chipped contain what's called like jugalones, or they're basically these chemicals that inhibit growth of other plants. You want to not use those as mulch because they'll damage your plants. So just check, like common ones like that are black walnut, and I think eucalyptus has that. There's a few more, but yeah, but basically, leaves are a great mulch. Oh yeah, jugalones, yeah. Juglones. So biochar, the way that it is helping with storing carbon in the soil, in my understanding, and again, like, I'm not a total expert, I'm continuously learning, but my understanding is because in the process where wood is burned, often like the whole branch, like the whole part of the wood is burning, and it releases like the carbon that was stored in the tree back into the atmosphere. But when you create biochar, you stop the burning process, or you're burning it without oxygen. So the carbon filled structure of the tree that like creates the charcoal, that's the carbon that's still like locked in that form. And then when it's mixed into the soil, it stays as part of the soil for many, many, many years. A great historical example of this is called terra preta. It's the biochar rich soils of the Amazon. They're the like terra preta means like black earth, and this is a big way of like, or a huge method of people in the Amazon for when they were creating what's now known as like this super lush like black soil of the Amazon, but that's actually anthropogenic soil. Tropical soils are actually quite shallow. And they did it by incorporating biochar. Sorry, that's a lot of information. I know. I feel like maybe I could have structured that a little better. So, but I never know like what are people interested in, and so I just kind of, I suppose the main goal here is to use our little time on our little devices with made out of these non-renewables to hopefully empower you guys and spark something in you to want to engage a little deeper with helping the planet, which you guys obviously already are super interested in. I really, feel a lot of respect for everybody in this group because you're interested in this and you're showing up and you are like making efforts to learn and do better. So I'm really grateful to get to be here with you guys. And if you're interested, I put out podcast episodes. I try to do 2 a month. Sometimes it's only 1 a month because I'm handling like my client load here, and I also do like social media and different things for people because, as you guys have probably heard, Hawaii is not exactly a cheap place to live. So everybody here pretty much has like multiple jobs, me included. But once a month or so, I have, sometimes more, I have interviews with people who really go into depth on these types of subjects. The one that I put in the chat with Zach Weiss is like one of my favorites, but there's so many. I mean, something you guys might be interested in is, there's like this whole concept of seaforestation, which is like reforesting the oceans. Something a lot of people don't know is like a lot of the deforestation on land has been actually mirrored by deforestation of the kelp forests of the ocean. And there are a lot of different people working to reforest the oceans, the kelp forests of the oceans. And there's I think it was the first episode of 2022, we covered seaforestation and marine permaculture with this guy, Dr. Brian Van Herzen, who has a whole organization based around growing kelp in a regenerative way. So that could be interesting for you guys. Yeah, and I'd love to stay connected or be connected. I'll also put my Instagram here and my email. If you guys like, I don't know, if everybody uses social media or Food Forest Goddess, which is a little cheesy, but I just chose that years ago and I've just stuck with it. Is my Instagram, and then my email is jenningsingram@gmail.com. And thank you. I'm so happy to have, come on here. And if you guys want to connect with me, I'm so happy to connect with you. Also, if people who'd be interesting podcast guests, I'm always like hunting out new interesting podcast guests. I particularly love to interview like women and people of color. That's a real something that I value and want to really include as much as possible on the podcast. So yeah, thanks for being here. And I'm excited to stay connected with you guys and learn more, and I love getting to connect and talk. And I also love, the concept of all of us maybe leaving this call and going to do something like directly for the planet, whatever that looks like for you.